Welcome to Geek Church. I'm Jared Elrod. This is episode 31, and we're here at Empire Comics for a special interview. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, guys. This is Ben Schwartz with Empire's Comics Vault and also ECV Press in Sacramento, California. Glad to be here and kind of excited to do this. I haven't done something like this before.
All right. Well, cool. Well, we're glad to have you. Of course, we met up at the comic convention, SatCon.
Yep.
And we talked about that a few episodes ago, so we can set up this interview. So, first question is, how did you get into comics? Because that's always an interesting story.
Back when I was a kid, I first started reading comics probably reading or looking at probably about 5 or 6 years old. It was the stuff I would see on the rack at 7-Eleven, or we used to have a Safeway where they wouldn't actually put them out. They would just put them in a big cart, and you had to sift through them. Mm-hmm. So that was what got me into it. There wasn't anybody, I didn't have a figure that read them and pushed them on me. It was something that I just kind of gravitated to. Okay. It got me reading. It got me really interested in the characters, in the idea of the science fiction behind it. And obviously I'm looking back, there's no way I was thinking this, but as I get older, I realize the things started to attract me more visually, in the television, in movies, and you can really trace it all back to my love of comic books. All right. So from there, it just kept going and it never stopped.
It's like a virus. It just consumes your life.
It really does. It just gets in your blood or something.
Then let me ask, because when I started, I gravitated towards DC, and mm-hmm. I started off with Green Lantern. I had some early Marvel stuff, but when I really actually started getting my own money, I was getting a lot of Green Lantern, and that kind of kept me more in DC. Jeff he was more of a X-Men kind of guy, mm-hmm. Avengers, but mostly X-Men. Like, what were you when you started off? What was your main thing you went back to?
When I first started off, there really wasn't anything that I could get on a regular basis because I didn't have any comic book stores. So it was, quite frankly, whatever was on the shelf. Okay. I was doing Marvel, I was doing DC, I was doing ElfQuest, I was doing whatever was there, and of course there would be issues missing, but I didn't care, I just had to get whatever was there. Mm-hmm. Now, once I found a comic book store, once I had a little bit of money of my own, that I then had the discretion to hunt down and look for things, it was Marvel. Okay. It was absolutely Marvel. Hands down, the characters just appealed to me more. They felt, in my eyes, a little more down to earth. I mean, it's hard to say that about a guy who has spider powers, but when you look at Peter Parker, his life, dealing with family, dealing with trying to have a job, trying to find a girl, all his anxieties, that kind of stuff appealed to me a lot more. Sometimes Steve Rogers' insecurity in America or in his own behavior. Not that DC didn't have that. It's just when I'd read DC comics, especially back in the day, they were a lot more straightforward with the Superman flies in, punches someone, and he's gone.
Marvel's much more of the psychological approach, the character behind the stuff, yes. And it was always about how they beat the person, but sometimes it was the psychology behind the character or how they were feeling.
Yeah, even the villains were much more fleshed out, in my opinion. I know DC heads will argue this because there are exceptions now.
Yeah, exceptions like the Joker or even Lex Luthor, but for the most part, a lot of them are just a guy who needs to get punched to save the story compared to, like you said, with Spider-Man. Well,
then there's my one exception. Once I actually had some money, the two things I read for DC was I read Teen Titans. Okay. Because
and that was all about,
Perez and Wolfman.
Yeah, issues of the time, and so that was a big exception there.
Those two together are like peanut butter and jelly, mm-hmm. and it's like the Beatles. It's like, they separate, they're great, mm-hmm. but together, there's something beyond. Yeah. So I read that, and I was always really, really attracted to the leads in the superheroes. Okay. And I think it really comes from my love of the science fiction, and I'm a real big fan of a lot of science fiction that goes a lot farther mm-hmm. than just your typical things that we can see 10 years in the future. And the Legion with their flight rings, the giant core, their connection with the time travel, trying to police an entire government that spread over galaxies. It was something really appealing to me. So those two books I loved from DC, but it was predominantly Marvel. And now I'm probably 50-50. Okay. Because in the 90s I had a falling out with Marvel, as a lot of us did. It just wasn't for me. I wasn't the big shoulder pads. All my heroes have to have guns. Yeah. I mean, as soon as Spider-Man picks up a gun, I'm gone.
It kills it.
I'm done. And so I left Marvel for about 10 years. Okay. And that got me looking for DC. It really brought me into the independents more. Okay. And got me focused on that. So now I'm about 50-50. And although I love the characters and I have an attachment most definitely to a lot of the Marvel characters. I don't necessarily follow characters anymore. I follow writers.
Okay.
I don't follow artists. I love artists.
Yeah.
But there has almost never been a book that has been so badly drawn that the writing can't get past it for me.
Yeah.
But no matter how beautiful a book is, if the writing's no good, I don't want to waste my time.
Yeah, it's hard.
So
Well, so you mentioned independent, which is interesting because when I started, I didn't really even know there was much of an independent market as a kid. It was DC, Marvel, and even Marvel was kind of out there. I was more of like a DC kid.
Yeah.
And so recently, especially recently, I've really gone back and catching up on all that, great '90s independent stuff.
Yeah.
Right now, there's amazing stuff. I think probably one of my favorite things, just out of anything right now, is Invincible.
Yeah, that's a fun
I'm
one.
loving Invincible. So like, what out of the independent, like, what are you is your favorite right now?
right now, one of the big ones that I really enjoy is actually a throwback from the 90s. It's John Byrne's X-Men. John Byrne is an absolute genius from back in the day with Chris Claremont and X-Men. He wrote all the things that they keep going back to over and over and over again. He started a book in the 90s about 5 young individuals who found themselves in the real world waking up from an experiment where no one else had superpowers.
Okay.
And it not only explored their reaction to the world's reaction to them, but also how these superpowers would fit in given the actual physics of the world.
Okay.
So it's a really fun book. He ended it about 15 years ago, promised us he'd come back. 15 years later, he's back, and it's going strong. The fan base is there.
Nice.
Thank God, so that I can keep having this. And the stories are phenomenal.
Okay, cool.
So that's one of my favorite. Speaking of Invincible, Walking Dead is good. I like Invincible, but Walking Dead is by far, I personally feel, a better book.
Is
only
it?
because
That's what I've been hearing.
only because of the characterizations. The zombies are a backdrop. If you don't,
Okay.
even if you don't like zombies, you don't have to worry about it because they're no more important to the story in most cases than all the cars and people going to work
Okay.
outside the store today. It just happens to be the setting. The story is all about the people that are there, how they interact with each other, how they get close to each other, push each other away, what people will do to other people given certain situations to
Okay.
survive. And you don't know who's going to live from issue to issue. You don't know what's going to happen.
Nice.
Every single issue is a surprise.
Okay. Well,
So
I think that
I really enjoy that book.
probably pushes me over. I have to go pick it up because, of course, I love Invincible stuff, and I know it's even more popular. But I'm like, really? Do we really need more zombies?
You know, and that's the thing. This was the book that started
Okay.
for comic books.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was literally, you could still find a couple books here and there. Walking Dead came out, Walking Dead hit, and now I've got like 15, 20 books on the shelf.
Okay.
Just
So it's
for
definitely
zombies.
the one to pick up.
If you're going to do one, it is the one.
Okay.
A lot of the other ones, if you're zombie fans, go for it. I'm not a big gore guy.
Okay.
A lot of them are just zombies ripping people apart. You know,
Yeah.
people running, trying to get away. It's a pretty generic and pretty standard formula that a 5-year-old could write in a lot of instances. But I know that whereas I will still pick up some of the crappiest science fiction movies I've
Yeah.
ever seen,
I'm one of those.
somebody who's into the horror will do the same thing. So
Okay.
it's just the pot calling the kettle black, and it's all preference.
Okay. Okay, can I jump to the next question is, how did you make that transition, and what was kind of your story of going from, I read comics, I like comics, and to going, I want to have my own comic shop. I want to do this as a living.
Well, the transition was like instantaneous. I've always read them. They were always part of my life, and they were always going to be part of my life. This particular store, Empire Comics, we're now Empire Comics Vault, but Empire Comics had been doing really badly.
Okay.
And it was a store I frequented often.
Okay.
It was doing really, really badly. I had the opportunity to come in, take a peek at what was going on, talk to the owner about what he wanted, what we thought we'd be willing to give based on the customer base, the inventory. There wasn't much there. It literally was about a quarter of the size of this now, if not smaller.
Okay.
And so we worked it out, and it was a whirlwind. Once I decided that I saw that he needed help, and that I did not want to be sitting in that office for the rest of my life filing paperwork and making photocopies. It was literally like a 2 or 3 week process of just boom.
So you bought an existing kind of floundering comic business rather than saying, I'm going to start from scratch.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
and starting from scratch, honestly, it might not ever have occurred to me because I love reading comics, and even back then I wanted to write and create comics, but with the daily job, everything, and I say it's kind of funny that I say that because that old job I worked 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
I had like 6 weeks vacation, and I couldn't find time to do it.
Yeah.
I work twice as much here. I have no vacation, and yet I still produce comics. So I
Yeah.
guess it really comes down to the fact that if you want it, you're going to do it. And
Exactly.
I think getting out of that job and getting here into a creative environment and being able to talk to people like you, being able to talk to customers, meet artists, do things like that, it led into the next step. But taking over the store was a really good thing.
Okay.
It really, I don't know, it brought out something in myself, in my friends, in my family, and my wife that we were able to really take this, really run, build the existing customer base back up, bring in new customers, and ultimately, quadruple the size.
Okay, cool. Okay, so kind of a similar question, because you, of course, you mentioned writing and stuff. So you've started producing your own comics.
Yes.
I've got a couple of them. You got them over there selling. How did that go? Because everyone at some point wants to
Yes.
make their own comic, whether they do it or not, or they try it. How did that happen? You go from, okay, I buy comics, to I now own a comic shop, to I'm going to take it a step further and I'm going to follow that dream. I'm going to start producing our own comics.
Well, ultimately, like I said, before I even had this shop, and just like every kid in the early 90s, I had binders filled with ideas. I had notes. I had an artist friend who'd drawn up stuff. It's one of those things where you do it for a couple of years, and then you realize you graduate high school, things change, you move on. Those had always been there. I'd always come back to them every once in a while. I'd always kind of flip through them, maybe jotted a couple new things down. But when I took over the store and I got this place going and it started to stabilize where I could actually think for a little bit, the only thing that I would rather do than be behind this counter helping people find the comic books that they need is to be writing the comic books and have them be on the shelf myself. Okay. Now, I have no artistic ability. I knew that. And back in the day, finding an artist, if you didn't know him, was almost impossible. Now I have the advantage of having the shop, and I already knew a lot of local artists who were in the same situation as me. They just didn't know where to start. Okay. So just like with the shop, we kind of just jumped head in. I called everybody. One morning, I woke up, we'd been thinking about it, called everybody, got 15 people together, said, this is what we're planning, this is what we want to do, how can everybody be part of it? Okay. So from there, because our first book was called The Continuum, and the Continuum universe is basically the cornerstone of the universe, because the books that we produce, we have 11 available now, 13 more coming, they're all part of the same whole. So whether it's a book set in feudal China, or whether it's a book set in some savage land or some other planet, they're all going to be connected. Okay. And so we talked to them, we figured out where everybody could hit different genres, and we just went forward. We hooked up writers with artists and went. Okay. Now, 11 or 13 books later, we're still going, we're still moving. Things have changed. People have dropped out. We've lost writers. We've lost artists. We've pulled more in. We've looked for more local talent. We've looked on the internet, which has been an incredible boon to people who are looking to create their own books. Even if you don't know anyone, even if you can't find anyone locally in your town, you can go to websites and talk to artists. Yeah. Find collaborators, find people who are looking to get paid, and you can get the books out. Okay.
All right. The battery's low.
Uh-oh. Okay, that'll be fine. We're almost done. So let me ask you this then. What is the relation to the comic book company to the publishing company, other than, of course, you own this place, you're going to sell your own books? Is it like, do you do it through the comic company, or did you have to start a separate business?
No, it's a completely separate business. Empire's Comics Vault is our home base, and the company is actually ECV Press, which is Empire's Comics Vault Press. So we wanted it to be attached to the business, not only because this is my home, this is, no matter where I move, no matter what I do, the store is where we're at. It's got, obviously, myself and the people who are involved have a lot of attachment here, and we, of course, wanted their name recognition to pull the whole thing together. So, but they are two completely separate entities. Now, a lot of people, they'll put the books out there, they'll work with the people, and then they'll kind of come to an agreement on who owns what happens. With ECV Press, what I really didn't want is I didn't want one of those universes like Image used to be in the beginning, where Savage Dragon teams up with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, then the guy who owns Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles won't let you mention it again, so you can never reference that. Everything that's involved is owned by the company. Okay. So everything is ECV Press property. So whether if I don't have any stake in it at one point, I don't own my own characters. It's all on there so that we can keep a whole continuity. Which means as a comic creator, sometimes it can be a lot rougher for me. Because I write, but I also do all of the marketing, and I do all of the production. I do all of the editing along with my wife, which means that we have to pay every single person involved.
Okay.
Which means we pay the penciler, the inker, the colorist, the letterer, the graphic designers, the page layouts, the printing. It gets really expensive that way. Whereas there are cheaper ways to go about it, but it really ensures that if I'm with it, if I'm not with it, if it gets passed on to someone else, the people who are following the books and reading them won't have to worry about that.
It helps the fans because there's never, well, we've been wanting to do this for 15 years, but we didn't have the rights and kind of.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you can't, and it even happened with Witchblade in them.
But like you said, it's harder for you, but it helps the fans out, so that's cool.
It does, and the small press publishing is really hard. And you look at the wall, and I've got hundreds of books that come out every month from big name publishers. And as far as Image, IDW, Marvel, DC, all of that, trying to compete with that is hard.
Yeah.
Because honestly, we all have a finite amount of money, and when you need to know what's going to happen with the X-Men next,
you need to know.
You need to know. So we do all the cons. We hit up San Diego, Emerald City. We do WonderCon. We do the SAC cons, and that's where that and online is where we do most of our marketing.
Okay.
We have not approached Diamond yet.
Okay.
And the reason I haven't approached Diamond, who you really, honestly, if you don't go through Diamond, you're not going to get seen by retailers. I know that as a retailer only because I have people calling me or emailing me, but I don't honestly have time to go through all of that when I've got it in one book.
Exactly.
So we're going to approach Diamond, but what I wanted to do is I needed enough under my belt.
Okay.
And we're almost there. Like I said, with 13 books, it's a pretty decent supply. But the problem is, everybody who's involved in this project, or any of the projects, has typical jobs. So we can't promise a book every month.
Yeah.
Now, as fans, even people who love the indie stuff, if I see a book come out, people love it, they get the second issue, they get the third, they have to wait 8 months for number 3. They don't even bother to pick it up.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to happen. So I want to make sure we have at least a good 4-issue run of everything.
Okay.
So that people can get a full story.
Okay, cool.
And then we can go forward.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate
you
being able to do this interview. I'm sure our fans love the inside of this kind of stuff. So just thank you very much. And
thank you. And if you guys are on Facebook, go to Empire''S Comics Vault, Empire's Comics Vault. There's a page for that. There's also a page for ECV Press. And both of those have websites at www.ecvpress and www.empirecv.com. Thank you, guys.
All right. Next episode.